Well, good afternoon here in the European Parliament, and I'm absolutely delighted. I've got some constituents from all over the North West, and what we're going to do is just briefly talk to them and ask them what has been their experience. So shall we start from the right, please?
Yep. I'm Councillor Tony Harrison from Burnley. I've enjoyed this visit, it's been quite interesting. I'm amazed how many people are here visiting. The only question I have is, I'm worried about this campaign that we're going to be leading, because all my non-political friends seem to want to vote no, and it's hard to think of a quick answer to put them right.
Okay.
I can think of lots of answers, but nothing that's going to convince them.
Okay, well, we'll come to the questions afterwards.
Hi, I'm Councillor Christine Wright, and I'm from Blackpool, and I have the portfolio for housing, income generation and procurement.
Good.
Hello, I'm Lee Sheriff and I'm from Carlisle, and I'm a city councillor there as well.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Moore. I'm a city councillor in Manchester representing Withington Ward.
Wonderful. So we've got Greater Manchester here and Cumbria here and of course Lancashire as well.
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. So if I ask, what has struck you coming here? Has any of you been here before, and what has been different for you? Rebecca, you can have a first go now.
This is actually my second visit to the European Parliament, but thank you so much for inviting me. It's been really interesting. Something that's really struck me is in Manchester we have a lot of investment from the European Union into our city. We've had a lot of things in terms of regeneration on things like Victoria Station, on the Central Library, Metrolink, which connects us to the rest of Greater Manchester. But really coming here I think a lot of people in the UK feel quite disconnected from the European Union, not only geographically because we're not in mainland Europe, but also in a sort of cultural sense. So for me, it's been really interesting to see how our investment takes place and the real goings on.
Good, good. Lee?
Yeah, I mean, it's my second time here as well. Last time I came independently, so it's really good to come on an organised trip this time. And I think the thing that strikes me is to see, so many people from different nationalities all coming together, working together. And, obviously, at home we don't see this, but when you come here, you just see the sort of vastness of it and how important it is that we're part of something so big.
Yeah, I mean, it is, isn't it? It's incredible. There are 28 countries here, so that's a huge
And it'd be a shame
richness.
not to be part of that.
Yeah.
Well, my experience up to now is my first time, but I can't believe, again, the amount of people, but also what I was impressed by, the educational side of it, that, it sort of is very informative.
Yes.
And I think the more people get to see that, the more they may understand why Parliament is here in the first place.
I think that's very important actually, because one of the challenges I believe in this referendum we have is to make sure people make informed decision and not misinformed decision, because there's so much myths going around.
Yes.
Which sort of colors your judgment about things. But when you learn, then you realize actually the real world is totally different.
It's my first visit. I've been very impressed, I said, by the number of people here. But I did think the information we got in the museum part was very interesting, the history of how it all developed.
Okay, all right. Any of you have got kind of questions as well? I mean, you had a question, didn't you?
I had a question about, I'm finding it hard. I've not got to go knocking on doors campaigning. It's hard to think of a quick response to people who are so anti. I think that's influenced by the right-wing press. There's so much bad news about Europe.
Yes. I mean, I think for me, it's not easy, but it is a big question. It's an important question. It's also a question which is going to have a huge consequences for our next generations as well to come. Yeah. So it's so important that we actually make the right decision. I've been privileged to be elected, and I come here and I work here and I see what goes on here. I'm very clear in my head. In the sense that I think the world is in a way moving this way. There are many other parts of the world who have seen this unique example which we've got here, and they're trying to copy. And it would be really sad for us to be going backwards instead of really moving forward. But then I think the other thing is, if you look at it logically, thousands of years ago, as humans, how have we been moving on this journey? And the journey has been that, you start out by organizing as a village, and then to maybe a city, and then the region and a country. But how do we go forward? Because there's only one world and one humanity. So that journey also is going towards that side. And I think with our traveling and communication, we are being connected more and more. We are linked, you know. But the more
And
you
we've
then
got a
think,
global economy as well. It's the world's a small place these days.
that's right. So we're connected in that sense. So not being part of it, actually, in a way, we lose out. Because we'll be stuck with what others are doing. But if being part of it, then at least we're making that decision.
Yep.
And I'd rather be in a position where we're making that decision. And Britain's got a great experience, you know, in the history of the world, what they've been doing, and what we then contribute here in the European Union. So there'll be a loss, actually, for the European Union too.
Yep.
Anyone else?
I'd like to ask in a way, if, because there is so much negativity, say the worst thing happened and the vote was a no, what would the process be then, and what, you know, how would it affect England?
Yeah. I think the process, in a sense, is one level is quite clear, and that is if it's no, it's no. And then there's about 2 years in which you have to basically get yourself away from the European Union with all the different agreements and everything we've got. And I think that is very challenging. Because you know, we've worked 40 odd years to build this relationship in different ways, and now it's almost, that's why people talk about divorce.
Yes.
That's the whole idea.
Yes.
You know, it's not easy when you're getting married, coming together, it's something else. But then it's agreement, isn't it? There are 28 countries here. If we pull out, there's still 27, and we have to negotiate that agreement. So we haven't negotiated anything. And if you look at the history, then it takes about 4 to 7 years actually to do a good agreement. So we only have 2 years. And the bigger challenge than that is that as EU, we've done about 55, 57 agreements with the rest of the world, different countries. Now, all those agreements are not with us. They're also with the European Union.
Yes.
If we come out, we have to also negotiate all those.
So then the place, you know, like the car manufacturers that, you know, the German ones that England buys such a lot of their cars, how in a way would that be affected?
Well, it's a disaster, isn't it?
Yeah.
So even if we took the best scenario that in 2 years we can negotiate with the European Union. Now, but what about the other 53, 55 agreements we've got, yeah?
Yeah.
Because it will take anything between 4 and 7 years. And if for that uncertainty, millions and millions of jobs are connected to that, our exports are
So we'll be in limbo, is what you're saying,
That's
for
what
many
I'm saying.
years.
It'll be a disaster.
Right, yeah.
Anything else?
I had a question about national security.
Yep.
This week I've been absolutely appalled to see front bench Conservative ministers trying to, sort of for the Leave campaign, saying that Britain would be safer out of the European Union. I think anyone with any sense knows that the European Union have worked hard to ensure that national security and international security is great,
Well,
and it's one of our best
yes.
devices in the combat against terrorism, and it's stopped many terrorist attacks both on mainland Europe and Britain. What do you think the main implications for Britain's national security would be if we left the EU?
I mean, I think it's a very simplistic way of saying we'll be okay, and it's almost going back to the past history. The truth is, you know, we're not there. We're in the 21st century. This is a different place. And it's different in this sense. You know, if you imagine what was our military strength in the Second World War, you know, we had over 400 warships. How many do we have now? Less than 40. Our army is less than 5% what we had before. And then you add into it this global world where we're more connected, more moving. How do you control terrorism as separate as a, you know, you can't. It's not possible. It's only by working together we can deal with it. How do you control with this international crime? Let's take the example of refugees. It's a big one which is hitting us now, yeah? But there are smugglers who are making millions and billions through the misfortune of others. How do we do that if we're not working together? And isn't it basic that if we are all together, we are stronger? You know, it's nothing sophisticated in that argument. It's straightforward. You know, if there's more of us, we are stronger.
Absolutely.
Simple. So I think both on the cybercrime idea, this huge international crime idea, look at this army idea with what's happening with Russia, terrorism and all that stuff, everything actually points to us actually being stronger, better, protected if we are in the European Union.
Sure, totally agree.
I have a concern, Afsal, about tailoring our sort of argument, for staying in the EU to different groups. So, for example, a lot of older people I've spoken to have said that they want to leave, and they're looking at, the argument they have is, well, before the EU we managed, so they're looking to the past, which was, in my opinion, was a different world.
Yes.
So, some people we can say to them, it's things like your workers' rights and that will be diminished and things like that. But if somebody's retired, if somebody's, it doesn't affect them, then how do we convince them that actually it's a good thing, because it's going to be their children, their grandchildren, our children and grandchildren who are going to be affected. So how do we get the point across to those different groups?
Yeah, I think that's the difficulty, in a sense that this whole relationship of the European Union is huge, is complex, and it has a huge impact in different ways on different people. So what we need to need to do is to departmentalize it a little bit and say, look, first of all, look at the whole package. Yeah, in life, that's how it is. Even with the political parties, when we decide, we don't agree with everything, but we have to look at the package. So on package-wise, is it a good idea? And then secondly, you then break it down. And I think for an elderly people, you're saying, and I can understand that because they lived their life, they've been in a particular way of life when they lived. We are in a different time now. It doesn't really affect them. We then say, well, okay, where are we going again? And the bit for me is this. They know what it was like before. Let's remember Second World War. Remember the price of peace. One of the biggest things we have achieved in the European Union is to maintain peace for 70 years. Ask those 105 million people, their families who lost them, in the Second World War. What is the price for having that, So I think there's a lot, even a lot of old people, actually, for example, go and retire in Spain and other great areas of nice sunshine. That's part of being a European Union. People talk about, immigration and all that, but the truth is this, on balance, the European Union immigration is about same level. About 2 million of British are living in the European countries, in the European Union, and about 2 million of European Union are actually living in Britain. But what's interesting...
What happens to them? What happens to that's another question I have, is what happens to the people who were there and the people who would like to go and retire to places like Spain? If we come out of the EU, what happens to the people who are already over there? I don't think people have taken that into account, have they?
What they need to understand is through this agreement, being part of it. If we're not part of it, then we don't have that right. So that means they'll have to come back.
So we've got a million people in limbo, basically.
Absolutely. So when they talk about this immigration and all this, they've got to remember, if you go around the EU point, there are two types of immigration. One is this EU and one is non-EU. The EU is about the same. So if we get 2 million EU citizens out, well, we've got to receive 2 million back.
It goes both ways, doesn't it?
So it doesn't add anything to the argument. But I think overall, every level you look at it, the jobs, the business, the exports, all this, 3.5 million people talk about jobs. It's a huge number. More like half of our 50% of our exports that is coming to European Union. Much of billions of investment which comes through from the EU and from non-EU, because they also can see that by being part of Britain, they have access to 500 million. People here, and that's important as well. Look at those rights in the workplace, look at those, if you are on holidays, the roaming charges, aeroplane is late, the compensation, your washing machine, the warranty, and so many different ways in every day actually we get the benefit. So I think, it's a non-starter for me actually. The more I've looked at it, the more I've studied it, the more I've seen what's happening in the world, I think, we are richer being inside, we are stronger being inside, and we are better off overall. So why not?
Absolutely.
Will it affect the European health card if we come out of Europe? I think it will, won't it?
Everything. Look, everything we're enjoying in different ways is linked to this agreement. And what we're going to have to do is renegotiate everything. And the difficulty, ultimately, people say, well, they're going to have to negotiate. Of course, they do negotiation all the time. So nothing is new for us or the European Union. But it puts us at a disadvantage, both within the European Union, because you are smaller compared to 27, and to the world, because then one world is talking to us, they're talking to 62 million. But when they talk to European Union, they're talking to 500 million and world's biggest economy. Right. So the relationship changes altogether.
Can I just ask you a question? I think a lot of people who want out think after the 23rd of March, it's we're out. You'll lose your job, we'll be out of the union. But it won't be like that. It'll be a renegotiation,
Yes.
which, as you said, will take 2 years. That's a good argument against leaving, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, to me, the biggest argument ultimately is in the long game, our future generations, we're throwing away that future.
Yes, we are.
And that we can't afford.
Because
you
we've
know?
seen the benefits, haven't we? Some of the infrastructure things, some of the big...
Taken for granted as well, the benefits, because people choose not to see the benefits. To make their argument, certain people choose not to admit to the benefits that we are getting from it. So I think it's important, from our perspective, to make sure that we put the arguments over there so that people actually do understand, and people, and they are solid arguments that people can't really sort of dispute.
I mean, for me, like I said, I mean, I day in, day out, I spend my time and I look at it. I honestly don't look at it as my job idea, because I think, I'm a solicitor by profession. I was earning more in 2000 than what I'm earning now, and I can certainly go back,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's what's the interest of the public, really?
Yeah.
Is my children, their future I'm thinking about, yeah? And I can't see being better off. One of the best things I think anybody who's in doubt about it is, go and look at the Home Office Select Committee's 33 reports were done. They looked at each different aspects, and virtually almost all of them came back that said, on the balance, we are better off being inside than out.
Right.
So this is one of the best sort of research which is available in depth, more than anywhere you will find anything. This is it, and it says this. So why bother? Why risk? It's not perfect. Nobody's saying it's
And
perfect.
the cost of it as well. How much does a referendum cost? It's millions, isn't it?
But it's the isolation as well. It's the potential isolation that frightens me, because I don't want to be part of a little tiny, island that's sort of stuck away from the rest of the world. And it's what will happen. I feel, that's my fear. I don't want my children, sort of in future years, to be stuck somewhere where it's going to be hard to travel, even for a holiday somewhere. It's going to be expensive. It's going to be difficult.
I think the sad thing is that people in the street don't realise what we've had back. So if we've had something funded from the union, we don't have boards up that says this was funded by. So I think that's the thing. We've not been good at shouting, the pluses in that sense.
I think
if people saw more of that, the way they went round towns and cities, then they would think, well, that's the benefit of. But to a man in the street, they're none the wiser.
I think we poor at that, because when you come abroad, you see lots of signs. This was funded by the European Union. You'd occasionally see them in England, but not very often.
No.
That's right. But I think you only need to go around the whole North West,
there's
from
lots of
Blackpool,
Yes.
Cumbria,
Yes.
Liverpool, Manchester. You'll see them, all these different areas. Actually, it's so much difference that's been made. But one of the things for me is also the research. Horizon 2020 has allocated 80 billion, and British universities actually get the most out of it.
Yes.
Yeah, we do quite well out of them funding. And in Manchester, Manchester University is
On a very selfish perspective,
Go for it.
I work in research at Manchester University, and I'd be very concerned if we left the EU, because I would almost certainly lose my job, and a lot of my colleagues would lose their job. And we just look at some of the fantastic, innovative things that we're doing in Manchester. We've just opened the new Graphene Institute. We're the European City of Science for 2016. None of these things would be happening. None of this investment would be happening. There wouldn't be a buzz around our city. There wouldn't be economic benefits for our city or cultural benefits. We wouldn't have any of these amazing accolades to shout about if it wasn't for the European Union. 53% of the residents that I represent in South Manchester are students, and a lot of whom have come from the European Union. Equally, there's a lot of British students studying in Europe, and
It's
it's
easy to move. My granddaughter went to teach in Spain for a while, and it was so easy to do, but I'm sure it'll be more difficult once we leave the EU.
I think it's so much more. I mean, if we're just looking at the economic benefits, it's all the information's there, and perhaps we're not the best at delivering it. But if you just look at all of the research, education, cultural benefits, I think that Britain would look like such a different country, and it'd be so much of a poorer country
In lots of ways,
in so many ways.
Yeah, I mean, graphene you touched on. I mean, I find it fascinating, and there are two big points in there. The first one is the research point, the money we've got and how it changes, and not just on a personal level like your job, but actually it transforms everything. It almost transforms the world. And the graphene is one of those things. In Manchester there's a history, the steam engine idea, how that sort of developed, then moving on to the computer age, this was done there as well, and how that's changed the world. Graphene is another big one. It's a material which is so strong, which is, and the conductivity is better than copper and everything. It's going to transform everything in the next 10, 15 years. But that research, but the second point which is really important is the guys who actually discovered it, both were immigrants. So we've got to understand actually not all immigration is bad. And there are many immigrants, who contribute so much. I mean, take me. I was an immigrant, I was a child when I came here, but I worked all the way through. I've been a bus driver, I've been a mill worker, laborer, I've done youth work, I've done a police officer, I've been a solicitor, councillor, I was a Lord Mayor. I've been working, I've been contributing to society. So there are many great examples, of those immigrants who come in, who contribute and make a huge difference to everybody's life. And graphene is one of those. Those two, both guys were actually immigrants.
I think I like living in a multicultural society. I think
it makes it a richer society,
I was a
doesn't it?
policeman for many years
Yeah.
in Bradford, and I think I enjoyed working there more than anywhere.
Yeah.
Because the university was very good at attracting people from all over the world, and it was a very multinational.
It's a world class, isn't it?
Yeah.
Listen, guys, listen, everybody. Great. Thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for having you here. I hope you're enjoying it. There's more to see yet, and more people to meet, and I'm sure you will learn more. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah.